Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be drawing a new Sentinel of Light. The Sentinels of Light are a group of characters from League of Legends who essentially are fighting back the ruination and the black mist that's caused by Viego. The first and the original idea of the character that I wanted to do was some sort of old, sort of like a teacher or keeper of some sort of secret, and I felt that starting with a silhouette would be the best way to do it, so that I can get an interesting silhouette for a more interesting character. So I first went in and just did a rough sketch of a short, wide character, because there aren't actually that many very short, very wide characters in League of Legends. They're usually just very small, like Yordles. Yordles are very small, but not many of them are very wide. So I thought this would be an interesting sort of very fancy trope dwarf-like character. He'd have either one hammer or two hammers, some big shoulder plate armors, and then some sort of robes to try and carry across this idea of a teacher or a guardian or something like that. I would imagine this character as almost someone that stays back in some sort of keep and did research on and did research on the ruination, tried to train other people to be able to fight the ruination and things like that, because all of the Sentinel of Lights are usually out fighting the ruination. So I felt that it would be a cool idea to have someone who stays back in some sort of stronghold and teaches people to become Sentinels of Light. Some of you will have noticed that I haven't uploaded in a little while, and the main reason for that is because I've been practicing in my own time, doing different things and making different parts of my drawing better. One of those being line art, making the line art much cleaner, and then others will come into effect later in the video where I've been practicing on rendering techniques and shading and things like that. For this character though, I really needed to get a clean line all the way through the design so that he could keep this sort of mentor, very knows what to do and isn't rough around the edges at all, style and aesthetic for this character. Because if he had lots of rough edges, he might sort of become a decrepit sort of failing leader instead of a very much a stalwart leader against the ruination. His design is very simple, and I think that's mostly because I just wanted to try and get something done for YouTube and for you guys, because I haven't been showing you much of what I've been doing. So I just wanted to get something done to show you some of the techniques that I've been doing. Obviously you can see the last couple of videos that were on this channel, they were going into anatomy and gesture, which I haven't shown much gesture in this because I just wanted to show the character and not be distracted by dynamic movements. And I also think a dynamic movement wouldn't really fit this character, as he's meant to be a stalwart, old sort of mentor character. There were certain aspects that I tried to keep from the other Sentinel of Light characters that you can see around the screen. 3 of them are Sentinel of Light characters and one of them's a grave skin, because I really liked the Sentinel of Light grave skin that they've put on there. You can see here I struggle with hands a lot, so I did a couple of attempts and then thought this just isn't working. I'm not going to learn how to do hands without looking at reference, which is a big thing that I've learned. You have to start looking at reference to improve better. This was just tracing because even when I was looking at the hand and drawing while looking at the hand, it still wasn't properly matching up to how I wanted the hand to look. So I just shrunk the hand picture, rotated it to how I wanted it, and then it looks pretty good. I made the hands quite big for the character's size, just again to play into the tropes that he's sort of a dwarven character, even though dwarves don't to my knowledge, exist in the lore of Runeterra, or at least fantasy dwarves don't. One thing that I've been learning while doing stuff in my own time is that thinner lines often make the colour pop more when you go into doing the colouring. So I was trying to add in detail as well, because again it was a very sort of uncomplicated design, so just doing some lines somewhere to have some sort of density of complexity. That's a very complicated word or phrase. Some sort of density of complexity somewhere in this design where your eyes would go to. And I wanted your eyes to be up at the top, because there's nothing much going on down below. He's just got some simple robes. All the action is happening near his face, his shoulder pads, and then the weapons. So I used much thinner lines around that area so that I could fit in more detail. And also, if I used thin lines everywhere, then the small lines wouldn't look as small. So it was all about trying to get line weight variation in places where it would make sense, and having the big bulky outline of places being thicker lines, and then detailed things being thinner lines. You can see with some things, like I did it with the eyebrow ridge, and now I'm doing it with the shoulder plates, that I did just copy the thing that I'd already done over to the other side to keep things fairly symmetrical, and also just to speed up the process of drawing, so I wasn't getting bogged down in just trying to get a perfect eyebrow ridge symmetrical to the other one, for example, or to get these shoulder pads perfectly symmetrical when I could just copy and paste because I'm doing it on digital. Here I was trying to get some sort of cool weapon style, a mix between a club and an axe. You can see it kind of worked, but then I just decided to go in with something more simple and almost have these tentacle-like ruination black mist tentacles coming up the weapon, as if he's been tainted by the ruination or something, or these weapons have been created using the black mist or something like that, and that's why they can be effective against the black mist. I'm not really sure where that was going, but it's a cool, interesting design for his weapons, so I'm not complaining. Now, going to the colouring process. The first thing I always do when I do colouring things now is I just get in the block base flat colours so that I can see how the colours work together, if I need to make any changes, and also just before I start it gives me a picture of where the character's going for the colours. And the easiest way that I've found to do this is, instead of going around the edges really tidily, is just to go over it all very roughly and then just erase around the edges. I found that it's quicker because you only need to go around the edges once instead of going around the edges carefully and then erasing any bits you got wrong before. You can just go around the edges once to erase everything that you need to. And these sort of areas of brown, sort of bronzy colour, are going to turn into a very gold by adding highlights and dark depth shade, that's it, and adding shade. The other sections were going to stay pretty simple. Obviously just like a grey beard, pale skin, because he doesn't go out into the world much. He just sits in his hole, sits in this sort of fortress, reading books, etc. And then I went into colour pick off of Senna's outfit, and I got quite a purple colour from Senna's outfit, and I thought that would be pretty cool. If I did it again, I'd probably make it slightly more like greyish, so that it's not as rich and in your face, but it's not too bad. And again, with shade, you can shades and highlights, you can very easily change the colour of the entire outfit, which you'll see in a second. I then just went around some of the more detailed parts just to get the detailed parts right, so I didn't have to rub out anything more. Then I just went around some of the bits where I'd missed colours or done the wrong colour and did those, and then colour picked from the new champion that's coming out, Akshan. I colour picked from his weapon a much darker colour, and then there is the flat colours for this character. And now I colour pick the colour from my character, and then using the colour selector up in the top right, I just slid the colour up so it was much darker, and I moved it across to the grey slightly so that the colour was more desaturated. And then I just go around all of the shade areas very simply in just this darker colour. I could have gone around a little bit more on the bottom and around the shoulders a little more, but it doesn't matter too much. Then what I do is go into the blender tool and just blend out all those shadows, going from the dark to the light, and then the light to the dark, and then back from the dark into the light. And this just makes a very sort of natural feel for the shadows going into the lights. And then I decided to have a very bright highlight, and so I just slid the colour picker all the way down to a much more saturated, much more bright colour, and you can see the difference between the shade and the highlight and shade. It adds a lot of life to the character, which this character quite a lot needed. You can see how these shades and highlights cause the flatness of the character to go away, which really helps in amplifying sort of the clothing and making it not so plain. It adds a lot of life to it. Some of the placements of the highlights and the shadows were kind of off, like the ones on his left side especially. I was imagining the light coming from sort of his right side, but I ended up forgetting about that halfway through and kind of just not paying attention to that, which was a mistake on my part. Then I'm going into the face, and the face is going to be more detailed, and the shades have to be smaller, and there are going to be less highlights because skin is a less shiny surface. I started with the eyes and just colour picking from Senna's eyes, making a somewhat detailed eye, and then I go into the shadows of the face. The main ones are around the temples and the side that's hidden by the nose, and then into the cheekbones. With the cheekbone, you can see it's very high. It should have been much lower because no one's cheekbones are right under their eyes. So that should have been much lower. And then I just blend out some of the ones that I don't want to be as jagged. I leave the ones under the eyebrows as sort of under the eyebrow ridges as very, very sharp because I thought they would look sharper. And then I added a couple of highlights and blended them out quite a lot just to the top of the head and the ridge of the nose. I then go into the gold plating, and first I just did a basic sort of yellow and orange highlights and a sort of darker brown shade, and then I went over and did it again just to build up some more variation in the highlights. Then I just do that to the other places of gold, and you'll see in a second I finished that. With the second shoulder pad, I decided to go in a lot darker with these shadows so that I could have much more depth, and I think it actually didn't work too much because the clothes were already much darker, so I think having a lighter shade would have looked better as it contrasts more with just the basic clothes. You can see with these staffs, I decided not to do any shade at all because I wanted them to look extra shiny next to everything else. And then I go into his beard. His beard's pretty much the same as everything, but I sort of do more shade into the light areas and some light into the shade areas just so that I can get that variation that hair gives, where it's not all just one shape. I want to apologise for not uploading for 2 months. I had a lot of burnout and wasn't really into the drawing anymore, so I just took a small break, and then when I got back to drawing I decided just to draw naturally without having to record it. And if you want, I can show you the drawings that I've done while I've been away. I was really focusing on trying to improve the basics like line art and rendering of the clothes especially, just to sort of improve my drawings without like having to improve the gesture and things. Anyway, if you like this video, please leave a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more videos like this.